We are now in aspect 3 of Tavani's chapter 4 on computational ethics. And we're not going to get to a response to a concern with intentions with utilitarianism just yet, although we're kind of going to get there by looking at an alternative moral framework called Kantianism. So let's get into it. The main point here is that ethics has its roots in reason. And if we're going to think that ethics has its roots in reason, the reasoning process in our mind, then it would have to do with the intentions with which we approach our actions. And in that sense, actions are not right or wrong due to their consequences, but are rather right or wrong due to their intentions. Consequentialism, as you will recall, looks at morality of actions from the standpoint of consequences. Deontology, on the other hand, looks at morality of action from the standpoint of action itself, or rather the intentions with which it is done. One version of deontology is Kantianism, named after German philosopher Immanuel Kant. That will be the version of deontology that we will be working with in our class. The principal problem of Kantianism is the moral problem of using persons. Using persons means using them as mere means and not as ends. The important concept here is that of autonomy, and not using persons is to respect persons' autonomy. All of this is a kind of an introduction to Kantianism, but let's get into it in more detail. We know all of the above that we have spoken about with regard to utilitarianist ethics by using our reason. It is only rational beings that know that there are such moral duties not to kill, regardless of consequences. The kind of thinking is opposed to consequentialism, and according to this new way of moral thinking, morality is found in our intentions, or that is to say, in the right and moral intentions. Moral intentions are those that are according to duties that are right, regardless of consequences. This school of thought is called deontology. And according to it, some things are right and some things are wrong, according to the very nature of things, regardless of situation-dependent circumstances. For example, according to Kantianism, a basic form of deontological thinking about morality, and the only form of deontology that we will be concerned with, killing of persons is always morally wrong, and stealing from persons is always morally wrong, regardless of how many people are made happy or suffer as a result of these actions due to circumstances and consequences. Right? So Kantianism, as a deontological theory of ethics, looks at actions themselves. And it starts from that killing and stealing are always wrong in themselves, regardless of consequences or how many people are made happy or suffer as a result of these actions. The basic insight here is that there is just no intention that can justify there's no rational intention that can justify killing, murdering, or stealing. With reference to the above trolley problem, according to Kantianism, the general moral problem is that we would be using the one person in order to save five, to use an everyday expression. We often object to what is done to us by pointing out, you are using me. In other words, utilitarian solution to the trolley problem would not fly with Kantianism at all. We can't sacrifice one person to save five because we are using that one person to save five. Using persons is against the very nature of persons as rational beings, and is therefore morally wrong, according to Kantianism. Instead, according to the nature of persons, each person should be respected and not used. In a more technical vocabulary, according to what each person is, by their rational nature, it is wrong to use persons as means to achieve ends. Or, in terms of our example, it is wrong to use the one person as a means of saving five persons. To respect a person as a person is to treat them as an end in itself, rather than as a means to an end. Our moral intuition already tells us this when we intuitively object to slavery, using persons as a means to achieve various purposes. Killing a person is using a person as a means to some end, and stealing from a person is using a person as a means to some end. Whereas not killing persons and not stealing from a person is consistent with respecting a person as an end in themselves. More fundamentally, treating persons as ends in themselves is recognizing that, as rational being, each person must choose for themselves. A person is treated as an end in itself when we act according to what a person chooses, employing their reason for themselves. Right? If morality is a rational enterprise, it respects persons as rational persons. And as rational persons, each one of us strives to choose for ourselves. In the case of the trolley, we would not be respecting the one person whom we would sacrifice to save five, as someone who chooses for themselves, by our choosing to sacrifice them. In the same way, stealing from a person does not respect their choosing for themselves. That makes them into a person due to their rationality. Just as utilitarians see humans as fundamentally living persons in pursuit of happiness, Kantians see humans as fundamentally rational persons with a right to decide their own fates, or as autonomous. Autonomy here just means making decisions for oneself. Of course, it doesn't mean just rolling the dice and making those kinds of decisions, but autonomy, insofar as it is autonomy of rational persons, means making rational decisions for oneself. So, out of respect for autonomy of each person, Kantian thinking would dictate that we do not throw the switch and not violate the autonomy of persons, even though this may result in the death of five persons. As you can see, Kantian and utilitarian ethics here would have the very opposite answers as to what the moral action is. Utilitarians would say we must throw the switch, sacrifice one to save five. Kantians would say no person must be sacrificed, and so we must not throw a switch. No person must be used as a means to an end, because each person must decide for themselves and must, in that sense, be respected as an end in themselves in their autonomy. Of course, what we want to say here is that it's not just utilitarians somewhere over there or Kantians somewhere over there that are showing us these moral positions, but that we as rational persons pretty much think along utilitarian lines or think along Kantian lines. And these theories just spell out to us how we already think in clearer terms.